Good afternoon, everyone. I'm
Yes.
Neha Gopi Krishna. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Economics, Vimla College, Thrissur. So, good afternoon, one and all. Nice to meet you all participants. So, we are jointly organizing a national webinar today, jointly conducted by the Department of Economics, Dr. John Mathai Center, Calicut University, and the PG and Research Department, Vimla College, Thrissur. So we have eminent resource person, Dr. Vinod Abraham, who's a professor at CDS Trivandrum, who will be talking to us about labor and employment during the COVID-19 pandemic. I welcome you all to this national webinar. I now switch over to Dr. Vimla M., who's the head of the Department of Economics, to officially introduce Dr. Vinod Abraham, who's the resource person. Over to you, ma'am. Vimla, ma'am. We have Dr. Shaijan Davis here, who's the head of the Department of Economics, Dr. John Mathai Center, who will be introducing Dr. Vinod Abraham now. Over to Dr. Shaijan D. Sir, are you there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, Dr. Vinod Abraham. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm here. Good afternoon.
Yeah. Good afternoon,
Good afternoon,
Sneha.
sir.
Good afternoon, the head of the department, Vimla College, Dr. Vimla. Good afternoon, my colleagues and the colleagues of Dr. Vimla College. As you all know, the season of webinar has started since the spread of this pandemic. Even though we had conducting webinars previously, we started using this facility only during this situation. So, in fact, my colleagues and different people were started asking, why can't we also conduct a seminar? The immediate response that we have given to them is, let us wait for some more days and let us also think of some good topic for the discussion. And also let us wait for some eminent resource persons. So now the time has come to achieve all the three. That we have got eminent persons, we have waited for a few months, and we have got an important topic to be discussed. As it is conveyed to all, basically this is a 2 days webinar. This is the first day. And today we are having a discussion on the labor and employment issues of India during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tomorrow we will be having another serious discussion on state and the market during the pandemic. So about the state and market, I am not going to discuss now, which we will be listening tomorrow. About the labor and employment thing, I believe that it is the crucial point that has to be discussed, especially during a pandemic like this, for many reasons. And the foremost reason being, as a researcher on this area, I think that the employment is the primary route through which people earn income. So if the employment and the labor market is in trouble, it means quite a lot to the people, quite a lot to the country and the entire economy. Because of two reasons. One, it is not just that the earnings and wages of the workers will be getting affected. It is also because the owners or the enterprises or the investors will also be affected, because workers are not finding employment does also mean that the owners are not able to employ them, or the employment The lack of employment would also mean that there is a lack of production and there is a lack of profit. So this is a crucial aspect why the labor becomes, or labor market and employment becomes a crucial issue during the pandemic. And as you all know, Dr. Vinod Abraham has been working on this area for quite a lot of, a number of years. His articles regarding missing women labor force, the jobless growth and structural transformation, if I give you an example, has received national attention. Especially, he was the first person who wrote an article in Economic and Political Weekly regarding the absolute reduction in the employment workforce in India. Even though he has received some political threat from many corners, he is the person who identified this issue and highlighted at the national level that there is an absolute reduction in the workforce in the country, which is a matter of fact after the independence of the country. So he has been identified as the best person to discuss this issue. How can I introduce him? He has graduated from Pondicherry Central University, and then he has done his MPhil and PhD at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He has worked at ISID Delhi. Then he came back to Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, in 2006. He has been there as assistant professor first and promoted as associate professor, and at present, he is a professor at Center for Development Studies. He is also having charge of the National Research Program on Plantation and Development. There is an exclusive center within CDS which studies on the plantation related issues, and he is the person in charge of it. And they started conducting wonderful studies. And one more important contribution that he has done is, before the cancellation of this planning commission and the coming of Niti Aayog, Dr. Vinod Abraham has done a wonderful work for the planning commission on the MNREGA and its working in the southern states of the country. So evaluating in any degree, 360 degree, we would say that Dr. Vinod Abraham would be able to speak to us about the labor and employment issues during the. And we have here the colleagues of my department, colleagues from Vimala College, the research college of both the departments, and other participants from many states, including from Delhi, Bangalore, Tamil Nadu, and many other places. Formal welcome has already been done by Dr. Sneha, the coordinator of this seminar. We are going to start the presentation of Professor Vinod Abraham. After that, you can raise your questions. Maybe he will be speaking for 45 to 50 minutes. Then you can start raising the questions. Or it is better to scribble your questions in the chat box so that Dr. Vinod himself can see the questions, and at the end of his presentation, he can start answering that. Once the discussion is over, the session will be concluded by Dr. Vimala, the head of the department of Vimala College. So with this introduction, with pleasure, I invite Dr. Vinod Abraham to deliver his lecture on labor and employment during the COVID-19 pandemic in India. Welcome, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Shaijan. Am I visible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Shaijan. Thank you, Dr. Sneha. Thank you, Dr. Vimala. Thank you for this opportunity to be here to speak to you, share a few of my thoughts regarding labor and employment during the COVID in India as such. Broadly, I will be speaking on, as you know, that the topic is quite vast that we are trying to handle. So what I would try to do is to kind of restrict myself to looking at 4 different concerns. One is looking at employment and unemployment. Secondly, I'll be looking at wage conditions. Thirdly, I will be looking at conditions of work. And fourthly, I will be looking at labor relations. And I'll also be just focusing on this particular period of COVID as such, I will not spread around. I will try to restrict myself to this particular period. As we know that we only had a very short period starting from March to the current time, that is August of 10th or so. Hardly much time that has gone in between to do a study, to do an original study as such on these things. But what I have done is to kind of compile information from different sources. I have put my own thoughts to it, and I'm trying to present as to what is happening with regard to these 4 factors, that is employment, wages, conditions of work, and labor relations. Now, before I start off with the presentation on this thing, it is important to recognize what is the background conditions under which these 4 aspects have been there. That is what has been the background regarding employment, wages, conditions of work and labor relations in the economy. Before I start off with my presentation, let me just give a brief about that. First, I'll give a small brief on the base conditions. Then I'll speak a little bit about the pandemic. Then I'll theorize, provide a kind of analytical frame to look at the pandemic and the labor market, where I'll be looking at how do we expect the pandemic to affect the labor market, what are the various ways in which you should be looking at. Then I'll be giving certain empirical evidences on this thing. In providing the empirical evidences, I'll be focusing on employment, wages, conditions, and labor relations. Then finally, I'll be looking at some of the government responses to the labor market conditions and some policy lacunae as such. So this is broadly what I'll be speaking on. I'll try and finish it in about 40 to 50 minutes, and then we can take some few questions as such. Now, on the question about what has been the base conditions with regard to the labor market in India. Now, some of the aspects that is relating to labor market needs to be spelled out, which is quite known to you all, but still let me kind of reiterate so that we are all in the same platform from where to look at this. To start with, one of the primary feature of the labor market currently, the employment and labor market conditions currently, is the large share of youth in the labor market. That is, we have what we call as a demographic transition, and therefore a large number of young people in the labor market. Now, whether it will transit into a demographic dividend, that is an economic growth due to the demographic transition, that's still not known. But we have a large share of the youth population, share of youth in the working population as such. That's one of the features of the labor market. Second is that though there are large number of young people in the labor market, the transformation from agriculture or the primary sector to the other sectors, that is the secondary and the services sector, in terms of employment is still very low. So we have a large share of employment, roughly about 45 to 50% of the workers still in the agriculture sector, and the remaining are mostly in the services and the manufacturing sector. Now, when I say that the transformation has been low, it is in relation to the output shares. We know that the output share in the agriculture sector has been as low as somewhere around 15 to 16% right now, while that of the services sector is roughly about 60%. So the output transformation has been quite large, while the employment transformation has been quite low. So there is a kind of structural transformation lag that we expect. So that is the second feature. A third feature about the economy is this thing, the existence of a dual labor market. A dual labor market whereby we see that a highly protected small formal sector is there in the economy, roughly what we estimate shows roughly about 8 to 9% of the total employment in the economy, while about 90% of the employment is still in the unorganized sector. So we have a large unorganized sector, which we call as, which in at least in literature terms, it is considered to be a competitive labor market, which is considered to be unorganized. And then we have an institutionalized, organized wage employment sector as such. So that is the second feature. So we have a dual wage labor market. And then we have also a market where a large share of the employment is still in self-employment. though the wage employment, with regard to wage employment, we have this duality, but when it comes to considering all the sectors of employment, we have the self-employed, the wage employed, and within wage employed, we have the casual and the regular. Now, if you look at compare between the self-employed and the wage employment, self-employment is still very large, roughly about 50%, though it has been declining in the recent years. About still a large share of self-employed are there in the economy. When we say there is a large share of self-employed, we also mean this thing that a large number of them are petty producers, producing for themselves and not expecting any wages. Now, this is very important in the context of the pandemic that we are going to speak about. The next aspect is the low wage employment. Again, most of the workers in the informal sector are informal workers also, without any particular forms of social security that are guiding them, and therefore have living under very poor working conditions, and their wages also are extremely low. We do not know how much it is, but at least roughly about 40%, as per the measures that various estimates that we have, roughly about 40% of these wage earners are lying below the minimum wages that is stipulated by the state. Now, minimum wages, as we know, is the wages that is declared by the state that is sufficient, that is just enough to meet the minimum needs of a person and his household, or subsistence wages, largely you can see that. So roughly about 40% of them do not even earn about subsistence wage, so we have very low wage rates also. Another feature of the labor market is that there is about 30% of the workers in the economy are considered to be migrant workers. Large number of migrants are there. Now, in comparison to other countries, the migration rates in India are quite low. Other countries like developed economies, or even developing other comparable developing economies, usually have about 50% to 55% of them are migrant workers. Developed economies, very large share, roughly about 80% of them are migrant workers. But India, we don't have such large migration. We have only about 30%. But even 30% is a very large volume when you consider the population size. We have a large volume of migrants actually, but the share of migrants in the total population is considerably low. So the volume of migration is important. Again, in the context of the stories that we have heard about the pandemic, we know this thing. And the final indicator that I would also want to throw up is what Dr. Shajan has already said about the low female participation rates in the economy. Extremely low participation rates in the economy year after year, it has been declining for quite some time. Today we have only in 2018-19, the reports that has come out, there seems to be a mild turnaround, a slight increase in the labor force participation rates, but still the participation rate seems to be very low, somewhere around in the urban areas it's about 15%, in the rural areas it's about 17 to 18%. So extremely low labor participation rates. So these are the base conditions that I wanted to throw up. I mean, the base conditions being large number of young workers who are still transiting between agriculture and non-agriculture, working at extremely low wage rates, I mean, in the informal sector, and those who are ready to migrate from one place to other. This is kind of the basic condition of the labor market that we have currently. And a dual sector with high wages for some few workers, very few workers, a high wage economy. Now, that's the first thing that I wanted to discuss. Now, the second aspect that I want to take you to is the pandemic itself. Let me just take you through the pandemic, what has been the response in a very succinctly. I'll talk about it. And then the more important aspect is about the pandemic and the labor market. So this connection I'll try to make in the next few minutes as such. Now, pandemic started off with the first case reaching Kerala, the COVID-19 pandemic that we are specifically talking about, reaching Kerala in January 2020, the first case being reported. Though the spread of the disease was largely in control till the mid-March, since then, the caseload has expanded exponentially across India. Kerala withstood with proactive policies for a long period of time, but the current spate of the disease seems to indicate widespread local and community spread of the disease both across India as well as in Kerala. As of today, on August 10th, India recorded about 22 lakh cumulative cases, 6.3 lakh active cases, and 44,000 deaths. Now, for Kerala, the corresponding figures are about 34,000 cumulative cases, about 12,000 active cases, and about 12,000 active cases, and about 109 deaths as such. Now, yes, the death rates has been quite low. Comparing to other countries, the death rates has been low in India, and comparing to India, the death rates has been lower in Kerala also. But there is, if not evidence, at least there is enough kind of arguments that are being placed that the number of cases that we have today, that are recorded today, are much beyond, much higher than what is actually being, the number of cases, actual cases are much higher than the number of cases that are being recorded, and the number of deaths are also much higher. So the real picture of how many cases, we know it's above 22 lakhs in India, but exact numbers we do not know. But 22 lakh right now, and it is expanding, it is growing quite fast. Now, the response of the government of India had taken early measures towards containing the disease. On March 24th, the entire country was declared under lockdown and restricting all economic and non-economic activities, with some very basic exceptions given to essential services and good production, such as agriculture, health services, home delivery, etc. The lockdown with various conditions of easing was extended till end of March. Thereafter, the unlock measures have been in place nationally, giving the regional governments a more active role in disease control and prevention. Now, coming to the economy, the pandemic has two sets of issues that would affect the economy. One with regard to diseases and deaths, that is the mortality and morbidity associated with the disease. Second is the measures to control the disease itself. Now, the measures to control the disease are both state-driven and voluntary as well. That is, individuals or groups taking their own measures, and the other is the state itself imposing certain measures. The direct effect of the disease and deaths affect participation of economic actors in various economic activities. While the consequence of death is very self-explanatory, that of the disease may need more attention. As we know, COVID-19 does not have any vaccine or treatment, and the treatment is symptomatic. Also, medical evidence shows that older people and people with comorbidities have greater susceptibility to the severe effects of the virus. Contracting the virus has three economic related issues. One is the treatment phase, which usually lasts about a month. Once you have the disease, it takes about a month for the treatment. Secondly, the long-term consequences is not well known. However, some studies do claim long-term effects on respiration, heart ailments, etc. Though we can't pinpoint what the long-term consequences are as of now, there is evidence to show that at least some of the patients may suffer from long-term consequences. Thirdly, there is also psychological trauma associated with COVID-19 patients, and that's also quite severe. This mainly stems from the nature of interaction or the stigma that the patient and probably the rest of the family also suffers from the society. Again, how severe or how long these issues would persist with the patient is not known, but it is enough to say that there exists such stigma, and that also has certain types of psychological trauma on the patients and their family as well. Now, the measures to control the disease by the state consists of two broad types. One is pharmaceutical interventions, and the other is non-pharmaceutical interventions. Now, pharmaceutical interventions include treatment lines and R&D towards the treatment. Non-pharmaceutical interventions, which we are more familiar about, include lifestyle measures that are imposed both by the central and the state governments to reduce the pandemic, which include lockdown, containment, quarantining, social distancing, etc. The measures adopted voluntarily against contracting or spreading the disease are voluntary measures. All the above aspects, mortality and morbidity associated with COVID-19 and their control measures, have very strong effects on the labor and employment in an economy. Let me put forward the channels of these effects on labor and employment and shall provide available evidence to the same. I shall then look into the government policies and then some recommendations that has been provided by the state on the same. Now, as I had told you, I'm looking at four aspects: employment and wages, conditions of work, and labor relations. First, let me put down how these will have an effect, how the pandemic will have an effect on all of these aspects, and then we'll go to taking up some of the evidences. Now, taking the first case, labor market performance, where I'll be looking at wages and employment as such. Now, viewing from an economic side, COVID-19 is a peculiar shock. It is, of course, a shock, but it's a peculiar shock. Usually, an economic shock starts from either the demand side or the supply side of the economy. And depending upon the strength of the relations of various interactions, the effect gets transmitted to the other side, from one side to the other side. Like, for instance, the oil price shock affecting the car demand at a later point of time. Now, pandemic is a strange shock as it affects both the supply and the demand side simultaneously. Supply of all goods and services are affected, and at the same time, the demand for the same is also restricted. This implies that there is no equilibrating force to correct the economic system to its previous equilibrium or its long-term steady state. Instead, a new equilibrium is formed at a lower level, with the entire demand and supply conditions reaching a lower level than earlier. It is like climbing a mountain for many years and then suddenly falling off a cliff, having to climb the cliff again to reach the same spot. Somewhat like what the familiar Naranatha Brandhan story that we are familiar about. Now let us look at the demand side effects. When I say demand side, I'm talking about labor demand as such. Okay, we all know that labor demand is a derived demand. Therefore, the demand for labor is largely determined by the demand for goods and services. Yet, it is not only the volume of goods and services, but also the composition of goods and services as well that is going to affect the demand for labor as such. So the demand for labor is a function of the aggregate demand in the economy. Now, how does the aggregate demand gets affected? It gets affected due to the COVID through multiple channels. As stated earlier, COVID effect comes through both the health impact and the containment efforts of the state. Now, taking the first case, that is the private household spending behavior. How does the household spending behavior gets affected due to the COVID demand? The first is about the health aspect itself. If there is death or disease in the household, there is a reduction in the household income in the household because of the earning member. Either one of the earning member is gone, or even if it's not an earning member, the expenditure of health expenditure on that particular person increases, and there is a diversion of income from the other sources of spending towards health expenditure as such. Now, the second aspect is the reduction in household income itself due to household earning from lockdown and restriction in the mobility. The third aspect is the reduction in household spending due to the uncertainties regarding future. Hence, the propensity to save increases and the consumption spending might decline for some time. Now, the fourth aspect is a change in consumption composition with greater emphasis on low income elastic goods, health protection, stay-at-home expenses, etc., and a lesser emphasis on high income elastic goods assets. So that's how the private household spending behavior is going to get affected. The second spending pattern, the second group that is where the spending pattern is going to get affected is the business spending. That is business to the business, final business spending, business to business spending, and the inter-industry trade that would be getting affected. The business spending would get affected because of the fall in final goods demand and the inventory stocking up in the economy. Secondly, there would be a fall in demand for intermediate goods due to the fall in final goods, which we have just now said, and there would be capacity underutilization as such. And thirdly, there would be a fall in production itself due to production and distribution due to the breakage of supply chains as such. Now, all this would mean that the demand for labor, and there is a third aspect to the same, that is the government spending itself. Now, the government spending also would have an effect on the labor market. Reduction in the government expenditure due to the fall in revenue from tax and non-tax revenue sources, and reduction and the diversion of government expenditure from other sources for COVID management as such. All the above factors would imply, all the three factors, that is private spending, business spending, and the government spending, would imply that the demand for labor would see a sudden dip compared to the earlier periods. In fact, we may see what we rarely see as what we call as the reverse multiplier, so very rare to occur. Actually, we may see it in operation under the conditions. Also, the composition of the demand would change as the composition of goods and services production has changed. The low-skilled labor demand with agriculture sector would remain intact due to the income elastic nature of its demand. However, the income elastic goods consumption would decline, while specific health and sanitation demand would increase. The volume and diversion of government spending may also reduce the demand for labor. However, if the government had been spending towards employment creation directly, then it will lead to a rise in employment demand at such. That is about the demand conditions. Now let's look at the labor supply conditions. The labor supply in general is affected by the remunerations and the conditions of work in the short run. COVID-19 affects the labor supply due to death and disease, as we had said earlier, containment measures and voluntary measures, and voluntary disease containment measures as such. Now again, death and disease is self-evident how it will affect the labor supply, but containment measures restricts mobility, also increase the cost, both psychic and real cost of labor supply. That is, to be present in the labor market, it would become more expensive than earlier. You have to take certain measures to be present in the labor market, to supply your labor to the labor market as well. So that would become. So I don't know where I stopped. I got cut. I think so when I was speaking about the labor supply. Okay. So okay, let me just continue. What I ended by was saying that both labor demand would decline as well as the labor supply also would be declining. Now, in an economy where the shift in the demand is completely compensated by an opposite shift in the supply curve, the wages should remain the same, even while the wage rates may remain, but the wage rates may remain the same, but the total employment in the economy may fall. The total fall in employment may show as unemployed if the expectation of economic improvement remains, or else there would be discouraged worker effect, workers moving out of the labor market, and unemployment also may start falling as well. So that is about the effects that we expected through the conditions to employment to labor market performance as that in terms of demand and supply. Now, in terms of conditions of work, there apart from the changes in the wages and employment, we should expect that the way in which work is being done during this particular period also has changed. Because of the restrictions that has come in terms of mobility, in terms of our lockdown, in terms of conditionalities that how work can be done, and the work conditions are also is expected to change a lot. But the change in the work conditions would depend upon what kind of worker you are. Like for instance, the regular wage employed worker, if you consider that the workers consist of different types, that is the regular wage employed, the contractual worker, the casual wage employed, the self-employed worker, all of them work under very different conditions of work, and the pandemic would also affect them quite differently. Like for instance, for the regular worker, the pandemic would not mean much. The effect of the pandemic would not mean much, except for the inconvenience of not being able to go to the office every day, or and maybe some kind of cut in the wages or the other kind of deferment in terms of salaries or in kinds of DNS allowance and so on and so forth. But for the contractual worker, if there is a contract that is existing, the pandemic would mean that the contract still exists, the contract doesn't disappear, but it would also mean that the future work, that is the contract, as the contract ends sometime in future, the possibility of finding a new job would actually reduce dramatically for the contractual worker. For the casual wage worker, it is an immediate loss of job. For the self-employed person, in fact, there is no loss of job as such, but there is a complete loss of earnings as such. So the self-employed person is employed according to his will and wish, but there is a complete stoppage of earnings as such. So there would be, depending upon what type of an employee you are, and what type of a worker you are, the conditions of work would keep differing from person to person. Now, apart from the conditions of work in terms of what type of worker you are, that is the nature of worker you are, the occupation that you are involved in, the industry that you are involved in also matters a lot in terms of conditions of work. Like for instance, all industries, whether you belong to which particular industry does not matter, the COVID-19 conditions have to be followed. For instance, social distancing. In some industries, you have only 50% attendance that is allowed. In some industries, you have only 25%. In some industries, the industries continue to be under lockdown even today. So the effect of the COVID kind of keeps differing from one particular industry to another industry, and the nature of the way in which this work can be done also has shifted a lot. Like for instance, what we are doing right now, from having regular office work as such, many of the jobs have moved into home works. Many of the jobs that used to be in office spaces has moved into the home conditions as such. So this also has its effects on the work as such. Now, finally, the COVID would also affect the way in which labor relations exist and the institutions on which labor relations exist also. The institutions, I mean the labor regulations as such. Much of the labor regulations, because of the COVID-19, a new type of narrative is building around labor regulations, and that's something that we need to discuss. And also labor relations with the employer and employees also going considerable changes occurring because of the labor relations between the employer and employee. That is also mainly because of the conditions that are emerging due to the COVID-19 as such. So these are the broad themes. These are the broad themes as well as the broad effects theoretically that we should be expecting with regard to the labor market as such. Now let me bring some evidence to what I had been talking about. Let's see what kind of evidence do we have to the theory, the framework that we had been talking about. I don't have evidence for everything actually. I have some evidence, but let's discuss how and some anecdotal evidence on what other aspects that changes has taken place. Okay, so yeah, so this is a survey that is done by the Reserve Bank of India. These are called current situation index, and the Reserve Bank of India does this survey every month, sorry. And what it does is to get what is the expectation regarding the economy currently and the future expectation. Okay, so let me just continue with from where we were. So this is the data that from the Reserve Bank of India, and this is the current situation index. It is basically the consumer expectations of the people, surveys done across the country, and this is for different years starting from March 2015, and you have the year over there written, and the last one over there is July 2020. So on March 2020 before that, and so on and so forth. Now, what we see here, we can see that the 100%, you can see it's given as percentage 100. So it means that when it says that 100, it means that compared to the previous period, what is your expectation regarding the current period, which is written as CSI, the current situation index, which is the blue line, and the red line is the future expectation index, that is compared to the previous period. What do you expect 1 year from now? That's the question. And this basically, so you can see that it's a perception survey. Basically, you're looking at the perception of the people, and this is what the perception shows. That is, currently people believe that from July 2019 onwards, March 2019 onwards, that particular period was worse off than the previous period. And this has become much, much worse during the period March to July 2020. That is the COVID-19 period that we are discussing about. But we should see also this, that the current situation index did not start dipping in March 2020. That is, it was not COVID alone that reduced each of 2019 itself. The future expectations and the current expectations of people were started declining. Now remember, during the before the COVID-19 phase itself, the economic growth in the economy had started slowing down. This is a reflection of what happened to the economic growth in terms of the expectations. Now, as economic students, we all know that expectations matter a lot. And in an economy, what drives an economy is expectations, right? It's not about what happens today, but what is your expectation about future? That is what makes you decide on various parameters, including how much you want to spend, how much you want to consume, how much you want to spend on what kind of savings you want to do, what kind of portfolio you want to manage. All of these questions are related to expectations regarding the future rather than the current scenario as such. Now, this is what expectations regarding the future, that is, it is the current scenario seems like from 1 year, the expectation today regarding July 2020 had been that it is worse off than what was previously. That's first thing. And as of July 2020, people expect that it would be worse off than currently. That is, if you look at the line slightly dipping below 100 over there, at between March 20 and July 20, slightly dipping below 20 over there. If you read it, it means that from 1 year from now, you would be expecting to live something somewhat worse off than what you are today. That's what it means. Today, as of what your condition today is, from 1 year from now, you expect to live a life that is worse off than today. So it would mean that people have very negative expectations about the future. That's what it is. Now, that's the first aspect to look at in terms of growth of the economy. What is the expectation about the economy? Are aware what index of industrial production is? It's an index where shows the production that is based, which is based to 100 for a particular year. In this case, it is 100 base year, and from there. Okay, so this is the index of industrial production. As we can see, this had been also during the months of March and April. This had fallen sharply, much, and the production has been declining. In other words, it just means that the expectations of growth in future, even today from July onwards, if you look into the future, the expectations is quite low. It is quite negative. It is quite, the sentiments are quite poor. That's what it means. And the actual production index of industrial production also shows that the output has been declining for quite some time. So in terms of demand conditions in the economy, which I started off with, the demand conditions in the economy, that seems to be quite bleak. And we don't need to explain much on this thing, why these demand conditions are quite bleak. We had explained the theory in the beginning, how the demand conditions can get affected due to the pandemic, and pandemic seems to have had a very serious effect on the demand conditions. CM monitoring Indian economy, they conduct. So this is the unemployment rates that I was talking about. Is it audible, visible?
Yes, sir, it's audible and it's visible.
Hello?
It's audible and it's visible, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. So you can see that the unemployment rate using the CMI, and it has sharply shot up during the months of January, March, April, and May. Employment rates reaching up to more than 25%. You can see that the all India Kerala employment rates actually had been showing some positives. So the unemployment rates had shot up dramatically during the period of the lockdown, January to March, to June end. During the months of May and June, which was expected during a COVID lockdown, a national lockdown, we should expect this thing. So unemployment rates had been rising, but it declined also in July 2020. That's one evidence. The second evidence, which I cannot show, but which you have to believe me for the time being, is this, that I had calculated the interstate coefficient of variation in unemployment rates, and the data shows that the coefficient of variation during the months of March, April, May, and June, it had been declining substantially. and it continues to decline in July also. Now, in the earlier slide, we have shown that during the months of March to July, the unemployment rates are shot up. Okay, and in this particular slide, what it means is that the declining coefficient of variation. It means that it is not only that it has shot up; it was across the country. Across the country, the decline in the rise in the unemployment rate was not very specific to any particular state, but it was across all the states as such. So, and it is quite obvious. But here we should also notice that when the unemployment rate starts falling in July, the month of July, the interstate variations does not actually climb up. It does not go back to its original pattern, but it remains low. In other words, when the unemployment rate starts falling, the fall in unemployment rates is also across the states also. So the rise in unemployment rates as well as the fall in unemployment rates also is quite similar across the states as well. In other words, when we see that, and we should expect this also, it is a lockdown phase, and during the lockdown, all the states would face very similar problem because it is a central government lockdown, and then once the lockdown is taken away, all the states would be facing similar economic conditions, and the economic conditions leading to falling unemployment as such. But there is another aspect to this fall in unemployment rates as such. Now, if you look at the period during March to April and May, unemployment rate has increased substantially. But along with that, if you look at the labor force participation rates, we find that just the period before the pandemic, that is January and February, the labor force participation rate nationally was roughly about 45 to 50%. And in month of March, it falls to about 41%. And in the month of April, it further falls to 35%. This is for the all India, this thing. And if you look at the case is somewhat very similar in the urban areas also. In fact, the urban areas, there is a much sharper fall in the labor force participation rate, not so much in the rural areas, but there is a fall in the listing. Now, if you compare the unemployment rates in all the regions, whether you take total, whether you take urban, whether you take rural, you find that the unemployment rate suddenly shoots up in the month of March, in the month of April, because the lockdown started in the end of March, and then in the month of April, you have a full lockdown going on. Yes. So yes, lockdown led to a large rise in unemployment rates, but it also led to a large fall in the labor force participation itself. Now, remember, I was talking about earlier, it is not only that unemployment increases, it also leads to a discouraged worker effect. That is, the people who are actually in the labor market, who would have been searching for employment or would have been doing some forms of employment in the labor market, with the lockdown coming in place and large rise in unemployment rates, a large share of the workers, they themselves withdraw from the labor market and not being in the labor market at all. Now, one should be considering this unemployment rate, this labor force, the fall in the labor force participation rate, are actually people who are actually ready to work, who were ready to work in a month before, and now who has gone out of the labor market. In other words, they are also part of the unemployed itself, but they are now withdrawn from the labor market. They are actually discouraged from participating in the labor market because they are almost sure that they will not find any job as such. So the unemployment rate has increased, but the rise in unemployment is actually during these months is actually a subdued and unemployment rates that we are actually seeing. The participation rates, decline in the participation rates, show that the unemployment rates should have been higher than what is being claimed. Now, another important, very interesting aspect is there, which would have been very interesting to see in the graph, but I'm not able to show the graph here. The intuition is only this much. Those states which has had the highest rate in unemployment during the pandemic, just during the pandemic, that is in the month of April, who had the highest unemployment rate, in the month of July, they were also the states which had the highest declining unemployment rates also. So, in other words, states like, for instance, I'll give an example of Jharkhand. Jharkhand in the month of May had an unemployment rate of 60%. Unemployment rate 60% is huge. 60% unemployment rate, while the decline in the unemployment rate was roughly about 50% after the pandemic, after the lockdown as such. So a 50% decline in the unemployment. But yet, we must see this thing that yes, all states which had very high unemployment rates had the largest declining unemployment rates also. So states which had very low unemployment rates, for instance, Jammu and Kashmir, which had the lowest unemployment rate in the month of April, in the month of just before the pandemic as such, in the month of May, during the peak of the pandemic as such, so a peak of the lockdown as such, which had the lowest unemployment rate, roughly about 6% unemployment rate. That particular state had also the lowest fall in the unemployment rate also. Now, though the states with high unemployment rates had the largest decline in unemployment rates, and states with low unemployment rates had the lowest decline in unemployment rates, another feature that stands is that the decline in unemployment has not been as strong as the unemployment levels itself, or in other words, not all of them got absorbed in the labor market. So there is a set of people who had gone through the peak, who had gone through unemployment, and now who are back in the labor market, but in the new situation are not able to find jobs at all. So unemployment has not, the unemployment rates has declined compared to a previous period, but has not led to the acceptance of all of them getting back into the labor market. Now, looking at the types of people who has lost jobs, again, let me give you the source of data. This is not, till now I was using the CMI data. This is a survey that was done by Asim Premji University, their Center for Sustainable Employment. They have done a survey on livelihoods, and this is taken from, the evidence is taken from them. We have not done any surveys as such. This is the evidence that is taken from their study. Shows that the people who have lost employment, as expected, the largest share of people who lost employment were casual wage employees, followed by regular wage employees. Now, it is usually we think that it will be in the this is in the rural areas. In the urban areas, the pattern remains more or less the same for all, that is casual, regular, and self-employed. In the rural areas, we find that generally it's the casual wage employed who have lost employment, followed by regular wage employed, and then followed by self-employed. But in general, we see that those who have lost employment are much higher in the urban areas compared to the rural areas during the pandemic. So the crux, the core of the pandemic has been affected in the urban areas compared to the rural areas, and the rural areas had relatively better off compared to the urban areas. Even there, the loss of employment has been quite large. Now, as I told you, the employment is not the only effect on this thing. The fall in employment would also mean that there would also be an effect on wages. Fall in employment is essentially rising unemployment, or fall in employment essentially means that your supply is higher than the demand that is there, and therefore the wage rates have to fall, the wages have to fall. Now we can see that, again, following from Asim Premji University's survey, the survey shows that the earnings in the urban and rural areas declined by as much as 86% and 51% in the rural and urban areas. That is, these are people who did not lose their jobs. These are not the unemployed. These are people who were keeping their jobs, but who had to now work at wages that were lower than what they were working at. So the unemployment picked up, and now the wage rates also were falling for those who were actually working. Now, another set of studies that is being done by ILO, it is not specific to India. It is comparing countries across four different countries across the globe. Evidence shows that not only has the employment declined and the wage rates has fallen, then hours of work has increased. It shows that for those who are working, those who are employed currently, the hours of work has increased. In other words, the effort that you are putting has increased, the wage rates that you are earning has declined, and many of them are remaining unemployed as such. Now let me go into with regard to working conditions as such. Regarding the working conditions, there are two aspects that I want to highlight on working conditions. One is regarding the conditions under which people are working, and secondly, it's about the labor relations that we were talking about. Let me start with the working conditions. Just give me a second. Let me just go back to the particular write-up that I had made. 1 second. Now, remember, I was talking about the dual labor market structure. So you had the set of workers who are permanent workers in the organized sector, enjoying various forms of labor securities. And labor securities would mean that income security, job security, and conditions of work security as such. So this small set of workers, about 9% of the workers, they have been enjoying this particular favorable or securities of work as such. Now, during the pandemic, what has happened is that the labor regulations themselves has come under question. Now, let me start with the labor regulations, and from there, I'll take you to conditions of work and labor relations as such. Now, we know that the protective cover for the workers come from different labor laws that are rooted in the constitutional provisions of the country. Over the years, the labor laws has not changed much, but the implementation of it has changed. Now we know that we have the labor regulations are going to be brought under the various labor codes that are coming up, which are being passed one by one in the past. Okay, so what I'll do now is to slowly try and wind it up now. Let me just get to the last part of what I was trying to say. Let me tell you this, that the labor regulations it was possible for the state to kind of wind down the labor regulations majorly. In some states it was possible, but mostly those who got affected, even in the organized sector, are those set of workers who were the informal workers as such. Now, for example, if you look at those who lost jobs, I'm not talking about the migrant workers, but those who lost jobs in the organized sector largely consists of the new age industrial units or service providers as such. Like for instance, Zomato, Swiggy, Uber, Ola, all the new age business units, which are basically web-based aggregators basically. The jobs in these sectors had to be cut down drastically during this particular phase. Now, of course, these are actually
Sir, it's not audible, sir.
Large firms. They should be falling under the labor market regulations. The conditions are not. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So what I was trying to say was this thing, that the workers belonging to these new age business units, these firms are extremely large firms in terms of capital sizes. They are bigger than most of the manufacturing units in the country. But when it comes to workers, these workers are not part of the regular workforce in the country. The workers are actually called in Uber, for example, they are business partners. Ola and Uber do not call them as workers. They have a very different set of relationship with the employer and the employee. In fact, many of them would be considered as partners rather than employees as such of the particular firm. Now, what happens is that when regulations, labor regulations are there, but these regulations are not effective on these firms at all. So much so that large number of workers could be laid off without any particular going through any particular process as such, and could be laid off as such. Finally, I'll also point this thing. Most of us are engaged in work from home. Now, work from home is a very interesting way to, or one of the ways in which work could be done from this thing. Technology allows for that, but it also has very serious implications in terms of labor arrangements in the country. Now, you know that when you're working from home, large number of these people who are working from home, they are the employer directly. Now, as economic students, you should know that the firm or the factory, the setting of the factory or the firm is the setting of the factory or the firm mainly because there can be a lot of cost reduction in terms of coordination, monitoring, and supervision of the workers, and that's why workers tend to work together in one particular firm and work together. Now, what this does, what work from home does, is to reduce this completely. That is, not reduce, increase the questions, increase the cost of monitoring, supervision, etc. What does it mean? If cost of monitoring and supervision increases, then the employers would to slowly turn away from the type of wages, that is from daily wages or monthly wages to piece rate wages. That is, the employers would say that you finish this piece of work and give it to me. Okay, I don't want to monitor you, I don't want to supervise you, you just finish off this work. And that would become the condition. And that would become the prevailing way in which wages would be. So there will be a shift from daily wages or time rated wages to piece rated wages that can be expected over the future. And also, this is an extremely self-exploitative measure. Self-exploitative measure in the sense, you do not know when to stop work, you do not know when to start work. The work starts at God knows when, and work stops at God knows when. It can go on and on and on, and there can be more and more work that keeps on coming, and it would be in such a fluid condition that you would not be able to know what is your work life and work is your home life as such. So the space that lies between work and space that lies between home, that would blur over a period of time, and that would mean that you would not know whether you are actually working or whether you are not working at all. So let me just summarize what I was trying to say. Pandemic, yes, it has had a very severe effect on the economy. Unemployment rates have increased, but it has also started declining. In states that has very low unemployment rates seems to have declined, low unemployment rates in those states. But states which had high unemployment rates, that also seems to have come down. But unemployment rates have not gone back to the previous state of unemployment, which would mean that large number of people with unemployment are still there in the labor market. Wage rates have fallen dramatically. Hours of work has increased dramatically. And that is what we should be expecting, because we should be expecting for some time in the future, because the demand for labor is going to be low in the future as well. As I had shown in the beginning, when in terms of expectations and the industrial production as such, the conditions of work has changed. The labor market regulations is changing. So to put it in one line, pandemic is affecting every facet of the labor market as such. The way in which that we do work, why do we work, the way in which we work, and what we get in return, how much to work, how much not to work, all this is being kind of defined by the pandemic through the ways we are trying to meet the pandemic, as well as through the way in which we are trying to control the pandemic as such. Now, what has been the role of the government? The government has taken various measures, but in one line, let me just put this thing for laxity of time, that the government's in a broad sense, the government's approach had been that of the earlier governments, that is the trickle down approach. That is, you provide to the manufacturing units, the firms that are working agriculture sector, you give it to the agriculture sector, firms you give to the manufacturing unit, services you give to the manufacturing services unit through the MSMEs, and expect that it will reach down to the workers. Should we expect that it will reach down to the workers? Can't say. We know that trickle down, the earlier poverty reduction programs had never worked properly, and that's the same thing that we are trying now also. Whether it will be effective or not, that's something to be seen. As for now, we don't have much evidence to say that things have shaped up, things have changed any better as such. I think I'll stop here. Now we'll take some questions and comments. Thank you very much for listening to me, despite all the problems that we had to with regard to viewing and hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. That was a very good presentation on your part, even though we had network issues in between. So I would now request all the participants to, type your queries in the chat box so that sir can give you the answers.
Dr. Vinod, we already have a few questions in the chat box. Shall we start
Yes.
trying?
So,
One
yeah,
is by
let
Jack
me
Lee
just
and
take one of the
Shashi Kumar.
questions. Yeah, this is a question by Jack Lee. Very interesting name. Okay. Sir, Kerala experiencing a high influx of return migration from Gulf migration. How will this affect our economy as a whole in Kerala? I think it is a very interesting question. With two types of effects. One is the migrants returning from Gulf, so that is actually an increasing labor supply into the economy. Obviously, it will reduce the labor, the wage rates prevailing in the economy. That's one effect that you can expect. Second thing is that this is actually reducing the remittances also, which would mean that the demand in the economy that is driven by the migrant consumption behavior, that will also decline. So in other words, the demand for goods and services in the economy would fall, while at the same time labor supply would increase in the economy. Overall, the wage rates would start falling, and there is a possibility that those who are at the edges, most probably not the international migrants, but those who are on the edges living and those who are the most vulnerable, they might fall back to poverty also. Not only in Kerala, in other states also, this is quite possible with the internal migration taking place. I think that's the response to the first question as such. The second question, it is recession from Shashi Kumar. It is recession now. How long this will persist? Severe effects on education especially. So do you think any reduction in syllabi will happen? I'm not sure about the syllabus, whether reduction on syllabus will happen or not. I can't say anything about that now. Severe effects on education, yes, certainly it is affecting education. Though my children, they are enjoying. I don't, I don't know about others. Young kids who have young children, they know that it is for the children. It's quite a happy time. Yes, they are having fun. But yes, certainly education is affected, and I don't need to comment on this. How long the recession will continue? It seems to me at least that it is not for the short run. That's what I try to show in the consumer expectation surveys in the beginning, that it is the expectations of people today about their economy after 1 year. That is the future expectations index, and I had shown that the future expectations index about the month of April in 2020, that is in the coming year, what it would be less than what we are living today. So people have very negative expectations about future. Expectations, poor expectations is a surefire sign of recession that is coming. So that should be expected. So about education, I cannot say anything much. I hope I am able to explain things to you. Thank you very much. Yes, the question about Harris PM. I think I just responded to that. Can this trickle-down policy bring changes in labor market during the short run? Yeah, see, I also do not go with the idea about that you should be actually supporting the employer, and then finally it will reach the employee. It will reach the employees or the workers. As my thinking goes largely with the what we call this thing, the cash transfer method as a better way of addressing this particular issue. And I think so. The committee that is chaired, that is. For which Dr. Shaijan is a member also, the finance committee, they have kind of advised somewhat very similar measures for the Kerala economy as such. Of course, the burden is going to be very huge, but the Kerala economy measures that has been suggested by the committee also is somewhat in lines of some forms of a cash transfer and not the support that is given through the employers as such. We know that the trickle down, it doesn't work simply because, because there are a lot of what we call points through which this money has to reach, and it depends upon a whole lot of power relations that stands in between the employer and the intermediary and the employee, and the employees bargaining power. A whole lot of structures are there in between for the money to finally reach the employees. So that's a difficult route to reach, rather than the other way, directly giving money to the workers. That plays much easier, much faster, and also it actually drives up the consumption much faster. Consumption in the economy much faster. So by any measure, even to increase the aggregate demand of the economy, that may be a much better. So that's what I feel. About Sudesh PM's question, I have doubt it's on gender inequality, one aspect of labor. Small business owners have been particularly vulnerable to the global lockdown. Does this gender inequality enter? And to what extent? Gender inequality, yes. I mean, in general, women have entrepreneurship among women has been much lower than male entrepreneurship. That has been there. But yes, the effect on the entrepreneurship, small entrepreneurs, petty producers of small entrepreneurship are the ones that are among the self-employed, that they are the ones that are worst affected, and sometimes much worse than the regular employees also. Because regular employees, through some source or the other, they would find their income, but self-employed people, their source of income comes from their production and sales. So that is they will not be able to sell their labor. They will not be able to sell their. They will not be make to any earnings at all. Yes, so the small business owners are certainly vulnerable, much more vulnerable than the rest of the regular wage earners. But does it mean that women and entrepreneurs and male entrepreneurs are on the same footing? No, actually, women entrepreneurs would be much worse off, simply because of their position in the market itself. They are not able to leverage many of the other factors that male entrepreneurs are able to take on, using social networks, using credit facilities that are available, a whole lot of measures that are available for the male entrepreneurs that's not available for females. So they would be doing much worse off, I think so. The question, Hasina, question, reskilling and upskilling laborers. I think it is very much required, but it's on the question of pandemic itself. It's a very difficult to measure to talk about in the short run. Reskilling and upskilling is very much necessary for an economy like ours, which is changing quite fast. Our economy is growing, not only growing very fast, it's also changing very fast. So reskilling, upskilling is very much necessary, but it's not a short-run measure. It cannot be just for the pandemic. It has to be in the long-term. This thing, Government of India is doing a lot of things, but if you ask me personally, I would go rather than reskilling and upskilling. Reskilling is probably for the people who have already got into the labor market and you want to kind of train them into the labor market. But more effective measures would be like getting them into long-term training with long-term multiple skills that are acquired, and then that leads them to learn skills on their own as such. Because the times that we are going into right now are where skills are becoming obsolete very fast. I mean, you need a platform. You will be in a platform for about 3 months, and the 4th month you are out because you don't have the knowledge of the new platform that has come in. So reskilling, yes, it is very much necessary, but I think so long-term is required. Arunachalam, is unorganized work is something related to India. There is how these countries handle these casual workers. Unorganized workers, yeah, it is very common across developing countries as well, and the problems are quite similar. The problems are very similar. The unorganized workers problems are quite similar. It's not only in India, in other countries also. But the size of the unorganized sector is quite large in India compared to other countries. Many countries have lower unorganized sectors, and also it's also about the way in which unorganized is measured also. Okay, so in some countries, a worker is considered to be organized if you have any one particular social security. So if you consider that as being part of the organized sector, then many India, large share of them would be in the organized sector. But the way in which that we measure, our unorganized sector is very large. The problems are also quite similar. In fact, if you know if you call unorganized work or informal work, what we call, I would put that term, informal work did not even come from India. It come from the measurement of it started off in Kenya, an African country context. So informal work, it has a very different, it has a global presence everywhere. Now, only thing to note is that the informal work that we call here, an unorganized sector or informal work that we call in the developed parts, that's slightly different. Informal work over there would mean that in non-legal work. We don't mean that. We mean that they are perfectly legal work, but it is not organized in a typical manner.
Dr. Vinod, can I have a suggestion?
Yeah, I think so. I have addressed quite a few of them. Can I? We'll stop here. I think so. What do you say? I mean, there might be more questions. Maybe we can take it up as a later issues. What do you say, Dr. Shaijan?
Yeah, that's what also I am thinking. In fact, maybe you can rush through all the questions in the chat box, and you can give a summary of by way of addressing these questions. That is enough rather than going one by one. So,
Yes.
and
So
that is
generally what let me make some broad kind of comments, and then I'll stop. I mean, what to expect? Most of the questions are relating to what to expect. Now, in the short run, there isn't much to expect actually. I mean, things doesn't look very positive right now. But not only because of the pandemic. The pandemic's what we call the effect of the pandemic on the rest of the economy is quite large, quite huge. In fact, I was reading something yesterday. I mean, globally, we have not faced something like this after the Second World War. Now, US, for instance, or any of the European economies, for instance, none of them had such low growth rates in the global economy. India's situation is not quite different, and we claim that we will achieve growth rates of about 3 to 4%, which is quite good at this particular time. If we achieve 3 to 4% economic growth, that's going to be very good under this condition, because most countries are going to be in the negatives. But IMF and other agencies do say that even we are going to be in the red. That is, we are also having to have a shrinkage of the economy. What I was talking in between, what we call as a reverse multiplier. The multiplier affecting in the wrong direction, and the economy kind of shrinking. That is what's going to be a possibility as it. If that's the case, it's not a short-run thing. It's actually a long-term to medium-term thing. The shrinkage starts off and then it stays for quite some time. Economy going into a new equilibrium, where employment output, everything kind of shrinks for some time, and then probably we start growing up again. In that case, employment is going to go, all the parameters that I was talking about, employment, wages, all of these factors are going to be negatively affected. Now, is it everything negative? Is everything going to be bad? Yes, to an extent it is. There are measures that the state government, the state can take up to kind of reduce the effect of these things. Like the current central government itself has taken a lot of measures. Like, for instance, the large package, the Atmanirbhar Bharat package, that is a large volume of amount of money that has gone in. About the directions of which I am doubtful about, but I think it's quite a large package. About the claim is that it's about 10% of the GDP. I said we don't know, and even in the developed countries, that's the package that has gone in. For stimulus packages that has gone is roughly about 10%. The earlier one was extremely small, but the current one is quite large. But will it have its effect? The question is that Indian economy is large. In the population is the second largest population in the world. The economy is not so large, but the population is very, very large. With the stimulus package, will it be able to bring at least to keep the people as they were before the pandemic? As much will it be possible? I'm doubtful. I think large number of people are falling into poverty despite the government efforts. And first thing is that I really don't agree with some of the aspects of the government's direction on this thing. But I also agree with the fact that the resources, the size of the state is small. We don't have a state that can actually meet with such huge demand that we have for the kind of conditions that we are in right now. The resources that we have is also very small at the state level. Both the national level and the Kerala state government also. We can see it. I mean, it's under severe stress, both the central and the state government that we are having right now. Therefore, there are kind of limitations how much that we are able to kind of overcome this thing. But it is to be seen. It is to be seen that a new form of economy is possible. It is not that pandemic. It is what is the growth that has affected, the development that has affected is the previous form of government, previous form of growth that we were talking about. If we can think about a growth that would be more inclusive, reaching out to more people, we may not have very high growth rates as the earlier phase, but we still be able to manage much better, I think so, than the previous phase. The growth rates may not be so high, but it may be a more inclusive growth. The development as we conceive it to be development, that may be better. We may not have so many poor people in the country. We may not have so much inequality in the country after pandemic. If we actually think of growth in a different manner, we can conceive development in a different manner. And so we should be taking this as an opportunity to grow in a different manner rather than thinking about what we have lost. It's an opportunity to grow in a different direction. I think I'll stop here. Thank you very much, Dr. Shaijan, Dr. Vimala, and Dr. Sneha. Over to you, Dr. Shaijan.
Yeah, thank you so much. As you can see, we have got more than 170 participants, and most of them are scribbling in the chat box regarding the presentation, as it is excellent and very informative. So I need not say the same. To my mind, you have covered all the dimensions of the labor market rather than just labor and employment aspect, and that's what was the quite important aspect of the presentation. And you also have left many questions for the participants to think and develop as a research question. So this is what we expected, in fact. And you also landed in a very important point called the role of the state and the especially in the federal setup, how the state government are facing the problem of minimal roles, especially in terms of the resources and funds. This aspect we'll be dealing next day. Dr. Ramakumar will be detailing about the role of the state and the market during the COVID. So we'll be having a connection from today's presentation and tomorrow's. To give you formal vote of thanks, I think Dr. Vimala is ready with us. Over to Dr. Vimala.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. For the last 1.5 hours, we were listening an excellent talk by Dr. Vinod Abraham on the topic labor and employment during the COVID-19 pandemic. Sir presented his lecture as two parts. In the first part, he beautifully discussed the broader aspects of his topic with some theoretical underpinnings. In the second part, Sir discussed the evidences with a thorough analysis on certain important variables like unemployment rate, wage rate, labor force participation rate, working conditions, labor regulations, and labor relations. And however, this COVID-19 has made serious effect on informal sector. Though the unemployment rate has been declining very recently, large unemployed persons are still in the labor market waiting for employment. And however, this lecture was a very informative one. Now, on behalf of the Department of Economics, Dr. John Mathai Center, and PG and Department of Economics, gratitude to you, sir. Thank you. I thank all the participants who actively participated in this session, the respective questions. Thank you all. Thank you for your participation. And also I thank the faculty members of John Mathai Center and faculty members of Vimala College for their participation in this session. Thank you.
Thank you, Vimla ma'am. Thank you, Vinod sir. And thank you, Dr. Shaijan sir. I hope the participants will fill in the feedback form as it is given in the chat box. The link is provided. If not, you have any network issues coming, I shall send you through mail. No issues and no worries regarding that. I hope you have enjoyed the session and benefited. And thank you so much. Dr. Shaijan, Dr. Vimla, is there anything else?
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
Okay, shall we wind up, sir, then? all the participants are requested to yes, kindly,
Okay.
yeah, kindly fill in the feedback forms. If not, I shall send you through your mail ID, which has been provided at the time of registration. For unregistered participants, kindly click the feedback link and fill in the forms. Thank you so much.